Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, hi everybody, and good evening here from Finland. And we are, I think it's entering our 101st program along these lines with we're reading through the book Glamour World Problem, and we're on our 41st reading. And right now we are looking at some of the glamours which in general hold humanity in prison, in thrall, the glamour of materiality, of sentiment, and now we're going to pick up this glamour of devotion, and then we'll see how far we get of the pairs of opposites, and then the glamours of the path. I just want to welcome all of those who are here, and I do this once, as you know, and if you come in later, then in my mind, I'm welcoming you, okay? So Alexandra, hi, and Anne, and Marie, Annette, Antoinette, Ariel, Carl, Carol, Catherine, Deborah, Francois, Frida, Helena, Helen, Karen, Marianne, Martha, Nathia, Sam, Sandra, Tia, Tuija, Veronique, Yvonne, Zenaidi, and Anne Veronica. And over here on the side of the staff, we have Michael and BL helping us, keeping everything straight technically as much as possible. So let's just before we begin, let's just have a little alignment, and then we'll get into our reading, which is starting on page, I think, 77. So just a little silence for all of us. And wherever we may be geographically, that's not so much the point as the coming together in one field of consciousness on the periphery of the ashram, or at least responsive to the energy of the ashram, so that we can assist in helping to clear the astral plane of so many, passionate distortions in which people believe and which take them in the wrong direction for so long, lives and lives. Maybe it's less of a problem now than it was in old Atlantis, but it's so many people still have the Atlantean consciousness. It's still a big problem. And you have only to, read the news to see the way the distortions are working out and how people protect the personality rather than the truth, rather than clarity of vision and understanding. So we can't serve our own individual personality and serve the illumined consciousness of the soul at the same time. We're going to have to change our values here, we as a human race. And we're learning how to do that. Now, so many glamours are listed on somewhere around page 120, 121, 22, many correlating with the rays. But DK, in this section of the book, seems to be anticipating the particular glamours to which humanity as a whole is prone. And this is the end of the six-ray age. It's pretty much coming in, and by the end of the century, there'll be a lot of attenuation of that ray. And by the year 2117, I imagine it'll be pretty well faded out in the cycle with which we are concerned. There's a larger cycle. And believe it or not, it has some 21,000 years left to run, and it's a six-ray cycle. And it's part of a 44,000 year cycle of the fourth ray. So you can imagine how intricate these cycles really are, but the masters, knowing how they work, can judge of the kinds of energies they release into the planet and into the human race, and how long the period of active work with those energies can possibly operate. We certainly do have a century ahead, roughly, when the sixth ray is still very much with us, and we're witnessing the recrudescence, the last great hurrah or flash of this particular ray in the cycle that is affecting humanity. And even though by the year 2025, the plans will, in all probability, he says, be laid for the first steps of the externalization of the hierarchy, we still will have plenty of obstruction to deal with. The forces of obstruction are alive and well, and they can certainly take advantage of Saturn. Even though Saturn can destroy obstructions, it can also reinforce them. And the first 720 years or so of the Aquarian cycle will have a lot to do with Saturn, the decanate ruler, and with trying to stop the progress or arranging and organizing things so that the true Aquarian progress can really occur. So, hang on, we're in for the ride here, and there'll be a number of incarnations that we have to pass through as we serve the hierarchy's objectives. Now, this glamour of devotion, I guess we're pretty familiar with it. The glamour of devotion causes many probationary disciples to wander circuitously around in the world of desire. Maybe they're always looking for someone or some ideal or something to be devoted to, and they exhaust that devotion, one object of devotion at a time. If you've ever read is it the first 5 lives of Annie Besant, or the story? She obviously had a six-ray personality, and she just fell passionately in love with one object of devotion after another. Of course, she was an advanced soul, and she was able really to advance the cause of those factors to which she was devoted. But it's really a one after the other thing, as a particular object of devotion no longer is appealing or is somehow seen through. The question of putting something on a pedestal or someone on a pedestal and then tearing them down when they fail to meet your every expectation is something that goes part and parcel with this glamour of devotion. It's kind of an unthinking orientation towards people, and then you wake up and you say, what did I see in that? And you go on to the next flaming devotion until you see through that, and so forth, and gradually you get tired of that, as it tells us in the law of repulse for the sixth ray. If you read that in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2, you really see how finally the sixth ray type frees himself, herself from this glamour but we can wander around plenty looking for the next object. This is primarily a glamour, he says, which affects six-ray persons, and by that you can say six-ray personalities or six-ray souls, and even those with the six-ray astral body can also be involved in it, although he doesn't exclude other types entirely. And it says, particularly potent at this time owing to the age-long activity of the sixth ray of devotion during the rapidly passing Piscean age. Well, there are these ray cycles. Not only does Pisces bring in the sixth ray along with the second, but there's an accompanying cycle of the sixth ray. You could have an age of Pisces with the fifth ray or the fourth ray or the second or whatever, but it just so happens that this last one was not only the Pisces energy, but the sixth ray along with it. So the ray cycle is a little perhaps different from the ray that passes through the constellation, and there's a double reinforcement of the sixth ray this time. Right. I basically just said what I had said here in blue. It is today one of the potent glamours of the really devoted aspirant. Well, certainly the masses are much ruled by this, and if you look at the sign Cancer, ruling mass consciousness, it's got Neptune as a ruler, and that brings in a lot of sixth ray, and so there's kind of a mindless devotion, I don't know, family first, my country, right or wrong, all that kind of thing. The near ones are held very, very close, and there is no freedom. So there's the so-called binding of the hands and feet of the teacher or the leader by the devoted students. And there's a whole process in the ashram, we're told, whereby the master has to be protected in a way by other members of the ashram from the waves of devotion released in his direction. So, we're dealing with a potent energy here, and it's very important. Now, let's not think that devotion is not important. The soul has great devotion, and so does the solar angel, but of course it's seen from a higher perspective. And the monad itself on the sixth plane from below is a lord of ceaseless and persevering devotion. Otherwise, it wouldn't make that tremendous pilgrimage down into the layers of confinement where we find ourselves. So anyway, it's a potent glamour, especially at first with the devoted aspirant. The path of aspiration is ruled by rays 6 and 4. So naturally, this for aspirants, the sixth ray will be powerful, and the devotion with it. They are devoted to a cause, to a teacher, to a creed. I remember I used to do a lot of singing, and I was a choir director in various churches and so forth. We always came to this thing called the Apostles' Creed, and it was, for the people in the church, it was just fine. For me, I just had to, grit my teeth as it professed to say what I believed in, none of which I believed in per se, because occultism had already made its way into my mind. But a creed can be extremely limiting. It comes from the word, it's related to the word credo, I believe, creed, credo, and so forth. And it can be extremely limiting, but the people who are devoted, they really hang on to that tightly because it gives them stability. Devotion to a person or to a duty. You think about the Marines and the Marines hymn, that song, all the members of the armed forces have their songs. I used to love every one of them. I come off the sixth ray a lot, so I know something of what this is all about. Or to a responsibility, ponder on this. the devoted aspirant, what can you be devoted to? All these things. Just pause for a moment and think about devotion in your life and how it operates and the intensity of how it operates. And, you can probably connect it to a degree with Mars and Neptune in your chart, but not entirely, because the ray chart is other than the astrological chart. Well, devotion can certainly get you there, I mean, if you're not too fanatical about it and you can see the larger picture, as the sixth ray type definitely does eventually, then it's okay. Matter of fact, it makes me really want to go to over here to page right. Yeah, Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2. And there is a beautiful thing that kind of tells you what happens when the sixth ray type recovers from the devotion. Mountain blue. Of course, blue is the right color, isn't it? Either blue or rose for the sixth ray. Anyway, he had tunnel vision for quite a while, and this is a marvelous, really, really interesting section of the old commentary. And I'll just say, gosh, I don't seem to be able to. Well, anyway, I'll just read this and hope for the best. He went through a lot of disappointment, but and let's see if I can possibly, in this view, if I make it just a little bit, I'm not sure, a little bit less, yeah, that'll be good. His tunnel disappeared, finally. He noticed not its loss. Upon the playground of the world he stood, with many fellow players, wide to the light of day. In the far distance stood a mountain blue, and from its summit issued forth a voice which said, "Come forward to the mountain top, and on its summit learn the invocation of a Savior. To this great task the follower, now a leader, bent his energies. He still pursues the way." So if you really want to get a wonderful insights about the liabilities and the cure of glamours on the various rays, just turn to this section in the 100s of Esoteric Psychology 2, page 165 or so. It's 166. It's just really excellent. Okay, now let's see. Browse. Okay, there we are. All right, so ponder on this, on our tendencies towards devotion and what we may gain or what we may lose by having it. This harmless desire along some line of idealism which confronts them becomes, and this is what we have to watch out for, definitely harmful both to themselves and to others, because through this glamour of devotion they swing into the rhythm of the world glamour, which is essentially the fog of desire. So, interesting about Germany in the Second World War, the personality ray of Germany, or personality sign, is Pisces. It's a sign much connected with the sixth ray and much connected with glamour. And he said the sensitive German people just became victims of this tendency, especially since the attack was launched against them first. And when you look at some of those, incredible. I was just, the other day, I saw a video clip of a leading Nazi by the name of Rudolf Hess. He parachuted on some quixotic notion into England, and he spent the rest of his life in prison there. He was going to resolve the war by himself. But anyway, the way he introduced Hitler at the time and the way the crowd added to it it's just a frightening example of where sixth-ray devotion can take you when it becomes fanatical. And there is fanaticism in the world today, you know. We have a sixth-ray country in the United States, sixth-ray personality, and you see it beginning already. Nothing like Germany yet, and hopefully never will be, but you see the mindless devotion that is possible when people are just swept by the fury of the astral body. So it can become harmless both to themselves and to others because they swing into the rhythm of the world glamour. Potent desire along any line, when it obliterates the wider vision, the second-ray vision, you might say, third-ray vision, first-ray vision, the vision of the rays of aspect, wider vision. Potent desire along any line when it obliterates the wider vision and shuts a man within a tiny circle of his own desire to satisfy his sentiment of devotion, this liking and disliking thing that is sentiment, is just as hampering as any of the other glamours and is even more dangerous because of the beautiful coloring which the resultant fog takes on. So we're bewildered in the fog, and it looks beautiful to us, and only later do we perhaps awaken and find that it's been a terrible trip all the time, and we've been led far away from reality. I'm remembering a song by Robert Schumann, a famous German composer in the 1830s and 40s, and I used to sing it. It was all about two young men who set out in the world full of happiness and joy and expectation, and one of them did the conventional thing, and he settled down and he married and had children, and the other tried everything but wandered far into the world of glamour. And only when the latter days came and he was an older person did he wake up, realizing that all his resources had been spent on that which was not worth it. So, he it's like he came out of the ocean of glamour and stood there and realized he had been drained of every worthwhile energy by his pursuit of these glamorous possibilities under the glamour of devotion particularly. Wonderful song, and hit home, hit home for me. Anyway, a man gets lost in a rapturous mist. Look at those words, rapturous mist. Have you ever experienced rapture? Have you experienced the rapture which led somewhere, and also the rapture which was misleading? I don't know, that's up to each one of us to figure out whether we've ever experienced that. A man gets lost in a rapturous mist of his own making. He, exaggerates and minimizes. This is one of the great issues about distortion, about glamour. Exaggeration and minimization. In this case, it's exaggeration about the value of something that doesn't have that kind of value at all. A man gets lost in a rapturous mist of his own making, which emanates from his astral body, and which is composed of the sentimentalizing, over liking of something beyond its own worth, the sentimentalizing of his own nature about his own desire and devotion to the object of his attracted attention. DK is being so careful with his words, but obviously we're not seeing the thing or whatever to which we are devoted in the right light. It's not truth. It's our own exaggerated idea or thought accompanied by much astral energy. And it's not real, and one day we have to wake up to that. With all true aspirants owing to the increased potency of their vibrations, this devotional sentiment can be particularly difficult and bring about a lengthy imprisonment. Now, remember, think back on the labors of Hercules, and here is Gemini, the third labor in Gemini, and what happens? The aspirant Hercules gets temporarily attached to the false teacher Busiris, and Busiris chains him to the altar, at first, and he is devoted to Busiris and thinks that he cannot achieve enlightenment unless he goes through Busiris. Well, at length he wakes up and he breaks his chains and chains Busiris then to the altar. But, I think many people have had this glamour of devotion with respect to some school of thought or some teacher in the school of thought. It may be satisfying for some people to feel that others are devoted to them, but I think it's a very imprisoning and difficult and uncomfortable situation for a teacher to realize that everybody is being hampered by that devotional sentiment. One illustration of this, he says, is the sentiment of devotion. Notice how he's linking these things. The word sentiment came quite early in this list of glamours, the general glamour of liking and disliking, the glamour of sentimentality that we have to get rid of if we're going to make any real advance in group work. Okay, so one illustration of this is the sentiment of devotion, poured out in a glamorous ecstasy. There we go again. Rapturous mists and glamorous ecstasies by probationary disciples upon the masters of the wisdom. Whoa, and you've seen it too, Some of those masters, they look like the way they are rendered into illustration, they look like they should be in some children's book rather than the real thing. And yet there are grown-up people who just believe in that kind of stuff. And what a waste of time it is. And some just never awaken to it. Anyway, they have the sentiment of devotion poured out in a glamorous ecstasy by probationary disciples upon the masters of the wisdom. And so many of them have that nice rosy colored look and unrealistic faces. And you just wonder how you can get stuck in such a devotion, but maybe we have to pass through that so we don't do it again, Around the names of the members of the hierarchy and around their work, and the work of the initiates and the disciplined disciples, mark that phrase, because maybe there are quite a few that are not, a rich glamour, rich and thick, is created, which prevents them, the great ones, ever reaching the disciple or his reaching them. It happened in Master DK's group. Two people damaged themselves very badly because there was some kind of opening to a thought form of Master DK, which was offering them, in his words, good words of mediocre cheer, something like that. Good words of mediocre cheer. In other words, oh, you're such a good disciple, and I'm really pleased with you, and all that kind of stuff. And a master would never talk that way. But these people, they wanted to hear it, and so they heard it, and they damaged their etheric and their astral bodies badly, and a lot of repair work was necessitated. So this rich glamour was created, which prevents the masters from ever reaching the disciple, or them from reaching, well, I don't know, or his reaching them. Actually, it should be the other way around, and that first them should not be capitalized, and the second his should be, but you get the idea. It is not possible to penetrate the dense glamour of devotion, vibrating with dynamic, ecstatic life, which emanates from the concentrated energy of the disciple. So it's a long time. It's not just that the master doesn't want to reach the disciple. He does, but we ourselves prevent it by what we generate in our own astral body and through kama manas. So just think for a moment, is your attitude toward the master heavy on the side of devotion, or what is it anyway? It's Madame Blavatsky, she had a lot of devotion. And but being an arhat, pretty much initiate of the fourth degree, and then later, according to Helena Roerich, making her way to what's called the central stronghold as a master. She was, really advanced. But when she met Moria on horseback in Tibet, so the story goes, she was, he'd been riding a long time, and they're quite real, these people, even if they have a Maya Varupa, it's still very tangible. And his horse was just full of mud, and the saddle was full of mud. And when she saw him, she ran to the horse and she just pressed her face into the mud against the saddle and just stayed there, because it was such a moment for her, meeting him in the flesh. And he said, that they had a lot of, I can't call it criticism, let's call it analysis of the, quote, old lady, as they called her. But she was younger then. And he said that you couldn't help but find it touching, the degree of devotion that she had. Of course, that wasn't going to stop her from writing this science and religion and just amazingly prescient work at the time of the release of her books. It wasn't going to make her float away on clouds of ecstasy, but personally, a sealed vase wherein he carries all his devotion to cast before the feet of him who waits to greet him at the gate. A sealed vase. She had that, and then she opened the vase when she encountered the master. I guess we can't fault her for that. It was so intense, and it didn't stop her from writing these brilliant books. Anyway, for this glamour, there are some age-old rules. Contact the greater self, capital, through the medium of the higher self, capital, and thus lose sight of the little self, its reactions, its desires, and intentions. So the one self, the higher self, and the little self. These are three about which we must know, and the gateway to the greater or the one self is always going to be soul consciousness. And how do we get into soul consciousness? Many ways, and we've been given them, but self-forgetfulness of the little self is one of them, and service is always effective if it's real, and because it's said that in the extremity of the disciple in service, the interest of the soul is drawn forth, and there is some kind of pervasion by the soul of the little serving personality. So, this is what we have to do, and eventually we become selfless human beings. Now, that's one, or the pure love of the soul, which is not personalized in any way. It's not a question of attraction or repulsion. It's something different. Attraction and repulsion are affects, and they have everything to do with sentiment, you see. And it's that's not the real love. So it's not personalized in any way, and which seeks no recognition. Now think about that. That's the third requirement. Eliminate all desire for recognition, however subtle that recognition may be, and from whomever it may be, eliminated. Otherwise, we cannot serve as a group in the 11th rule, which is basically becoming the group arhat. You can read that in Raised and Initiations, and I've written some commentaries on that are on Makara and so forth. So you can find that. The pure love of the soul, which is not personalized in any way and which seeks no recognition, can then pour into the world of glamour, which surrounds the devotee and the mists of his devotion, to get this, upon which he prides himself, more devoted than you, and all that kind of thing, will melt away. Will melt away. Pour in the love and it will melt away. Actually, when getting rid of glamour, sometimes it's just at first got to be the light that you pour in coming from the Ajna center, and you see things for what they are. Okay, well, that's a big one, and I think it applies, very much to many of us, or has applied. And I'm not really going to mix these glamours with each other. I'm just going to call it on this one. And because there's plenty to talk about with respect to this glamour of devotion. And then we'll have our, meditation on one of the many glamours that is afflicting us as a human race these days. And, it's not so much that we travel far in terms of pages, but this is a big devotion, and it can lead to problems, real problems in humanity at this time, because in that devoted state, people will do amazingly stupid things, and it can turn out to be a very big problem. So we made it to page 79, and the next reading is reading number 70, is number 42, and it's the 102nd program, and it starts at 79, and we'll deal with the glamours of the pairs of opposites. Now, you know what the pairs of opposites are, generally considered. They're not so much horizontal opposites as they are vertical opposites. And for us, usually soul and personality is what they're called. And we can get caught between them and the great struggle, apparently, between the soul and personality. So people get caught in that, and then we'll deal finally, and maybe we'll finish off these 5 next time, the glamours of the path. Now, people like yourselves, you're coming in on these webinars, you're listening to them, you're here every week or every other week or whatever. So, you're treading the path towards enlightenment and towards greater unity and eventual oneness and so forth. I would just say there are glamours to watch out for on the path. And maybe, right before the second initiation, which is a high point, actually, as DK tells someone, he says, look, you could take the second initiation, therefore we rate you highly, he says. Well, this person wanted to take the 4th initiation, but okay, never mind. DK was being realistic about them. But right before the second initiation can come in some really heavy glamours, sort of like one last big test. The astral body gets inflamed, and we have to make our way through that and over the burning ground into a situation of greater astral tranquility, so we can really learn to think. Because if you have an astral body that's always riled up, it's really hard to think, unless maybe you're a playwright or a composer or something like that. dealing with the fourth ray, therefore dealing with a very acute mind working with a very sensitive astral body. Each case has to be judged on its own merits. Okay, friends. So the next thing then is to see, we've been focusing on the glamour of devotion, and okay, maybe you have questions or thoughts on that. And failing that, then just the whole area of occultism, I just say, well, then anything in occultism we can discuss. So is there anybody that would like to say something? Okay, here is Olivia, and there you go, Olivia. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. So, I think we really see this glamour of devotion in the world of dictators, leaders that act like dictators, and this idea of all the people devoted to Trump, for example, and we can name many more. But DK has an interesting quote about how important the power of speech is as in world government, and he talks about the use of radio, and little did he touch on what's today TV, the internet, and social media. But he says in the field of politics, the masses are swayed by their orators, and never more so now than through the use of radio. And he talks about the racial antipathies that are spread, and glamours and illusions that find expression, bringing about the deception of the unthinking. And he says the man who has a golden tongue, the man who has the gift of playing with words and can voice with emphasis people's grievances, the juggler in statistics, the fanatic with a certain and sure cure for social ills, and the man who loves to fan racial hatreds can ever get a following. So this is, I think, what we're seeing here, this idea of this blind devotion. I think we have to take seriously when someone like Trump says, I could kill someone in Manhattan and
Park Avenue or something.
Yeah, and my followers wouldn't care, and there's really something true to that. This blind devotion, no matter what, and then the skill set here of keeping them riled up and keeping them believing things that are so untrue.
Yeah, that's what every demagogue really seeks for. He speaks to the astral body with the particular skills that you have spoken of. Now, of course, there's the, let's just say there's the opposite side to it with someone like a Churchill, whose oratory went a long way in holding England together so that there would not be a, yeah. But see, I'm hearing a lot of background stuff. I don't know what that is, but
really?
Some kind of, the ocean is coming up on the land. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, anyway, you're right. I mean, this great oratory can be used for positive things, but certainly it can be used for so much manipulation that we're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. We see the opposite. Interesting thing, Obama had a beautiful voice, and also a beautiful singing voice, and he was a wonderful orator, and his speeches were very uplifting with those who could go towards the spirit. And then we come along and we find very much the opposite. Well, look, we're told that America, wow, there's really something going on somewhere. Let's see what that is. That's a big thing. That America is the heir. I'm going to try something, Libby. I'm just going to try something for just one brief minute. Yeah, it was somehow your setting, but I'll unmute you in just a minute. The America is heir to the Piscean and sixth ray um, civilization and energies, and until recently, the less evolved human types had not been coming into America. But when DK wrote Cosmic Fire, he said, now they are, and also in fairly large numbers. So we have a big balancing act in America, and it's really affecting everybody, giving the green light to many people inclined towards fascism and dictatorship. And one of the things that we have is every dictator, as I think you really started out with this, they need the fanatical crowd. They need the devotees. And Nazism was this way. And fascism in Italy was this way. People were insane with devotion. Now, I don't know if we're there yet in the United States and all of its influence, but it's going in that direction. DK warned about it, about the latent fascism in the United States. The Nazi groups are marching, the Proud Boys or whatever they're called, people like that are beating people up if they look different. The skinheads are off on their ways. So the fascists are back, is what I can say, from a reincarnational cycle, and they really utilize the sixth ray to achieve their objectives. Okay, now I've unmuted you again, so it's a big, it's like the sound of the ocean.
Oh dear, I'm very sorry.
It's
Well,
okay.
I'm not sure what's going on. I'll just say that DK also makes the point that in public speaking that leaves less time for the public to have for consideration or clear thinking as opposed to reading. And so that's the other factor in public speaking in creating distortions, glamours, and illusions. And with that, I will sign off and you can speak.
Well, thank you for that,
Okay.
making the points. In some of these prison camps or places where they keep people who are virtually slave labor, they have the radio going all the time, broadcasting patriotic songs, whatever, and the people are so tired, they have no chance to reflect or think about what is happening to them, and deliberately they keep it that way, so that there's always something in the background preventing you from communing with your own thoughts. Now, of course, there's a lot of people that have to emerge out of the mass consciousness. The sign Cancer is very strong, and of course, you can't help but notice that the 4th of July, which is such a big deal in the United States, is smack in the middle of the sign of mass consciousness. So, there's a battle here, but I think the battle is largely because the United Nations headquarters, the major one, is in New York, and New York is going to become the capital of the United States. That is predicted by DK. It's going to move away from Washington, he says, and there's a very serious possibility that, given the second and sixth ray and the Aquarian nature of the United States and its Geminian nature, the head of the cosmic Christ, that the headquarters of the Christ will in fact take advantage of the United States. And so therefore a huge battle is going on to see if that country cannot be swayed away from its founding principles, in which Master R was so influential. Okay, so now hold on. You're self-muted, and
Michael.
Yes.
Frida had her hand, had a question, and then Tuija raised her hand. So perhaps taking Frida's question first, which is, can you comment on the distinction between the glamour of the path versus the misappropriation of the spiritual path by the personality?
Well, those two are going to go hand in hand. And tell you the truth, Frida, I think we should wait until we read what he has to say about that next week. It would be in context and probably a better informed discussion. But very definitely, soul energy can be misappropriated by the personality, and when it is, it tends to be distorted, and it tends to sink into the kama manas and no longer be what it is on the higher planes. So the two things you asked about, in my view, seem to go hand in hand. But I suggest we wait until we deal directly with what he has to say, and then we'll have a more informed discussion on it. That would be, I think, what we should do. Okay, and let's see now. Tuija is, yes, go ahead. Now, wait a second, you're self-mute. Now, there you go. Go ahead, Tuija. Yeah.
Yes. So, hello. Well, this the idea of the devotion, we so often are thinking about this in relationship to the sixth ray and like being attached. So that it is the quality that we have to try to get rid of. But as you were pointing as well about the monadic plane, the sixth plane, and the high devotion. And I was just thinking while we were reading about that, how I think nowadays it is really important quality that we somehow have strength to go through all of these demands which are now rising everywhere, and somehow to be devoted to the humanity, like we can see how Christ is devoted to humanity. Hierarchy is devoted to these lower lives, and thinking in that sense the redeeming process which is going on behind the scenes all the time. And I was just remembering something what Alice Bailey was writing, what I have liked so much, so I wish to read from the page 44, Bethlehem to Calvary. The initiate is not simply a good man. The world is full of good men who are probably a long way from being initiates. Neither is the initiate a well-meaning devotee. He is a man who has added a sound intellectual understanding to the basic qualifications of a sound moral character and devotion. Through discipline, he has coordinated his lower nature, the personality, so that it is a vessel meet for the master's use, that master being his own soul. He knows that he walks in a world of illusion, but is training himself whilst doing this to walk in the light of the soul, realizing that in service to his fellow men and in forgetfulness of self, he prepares himself to stand before the portal of initiation. Upon that path, he meets those who, like himself, and this is the wonderful part, are learning to be citizens of the kingdom. And that is what I think, that the devotion is something about this as well, that we are learning to be citizens of the real kingdom. In these horrors that we have now everywhere.
Right. Okay, it's a really good quote from Alice Bailey, and enunciates the kind of future that we have to ascribe to. We have to build this attitude into ourselves. It's not enough to be just good. We have to have these other qualifications and be the truly practical mystic. Devotion is a very great thing. Look, the planetary logos is devoted, the solar logos is devoted, but by the time we reach those levels of devotion, we have to define them in a different way. It has to do with loving focus, which still sees the wider picture, but expends a great deal of energy on a particular problem area in order to lift it up, and does not look away and get distracted, but continues its redeeming focus, then, that's a bit more like the devotion of the higher aspects of our nature. We cannot sell this ray away and say, no, it's devotion, but the blind, unintelligent devotion, which is so much involving conflicts and the love of low things. That's the kind of devotion that we have
and
to
I was thinking that this kind of little nuance difference in the devotion, that when we are devoted the way that we are devoted to somebody who would do for us something, or to be devoted the way that we are ready to sacrifice, they are two different things.
Yeah, selfless sacrificial devotion is one thing, and expectation of some reward following the devotion is quite another thing. It isn't even real devotion. It's a manipulation. So, all right, well, we have to be very discriminating here, because otherwise we are liable to throw the baby out with the bathwater, Devotion is a good thing if it's handled in the right way and at the right time. But this mindless, fanatical, narrow devotion causes a lot of trouble, and we're witnessing it in different parts of the world. Okay, thank you. Thank you for those thoughts. Now let's see, who else was it, Michael? I think
Olivia has her hand raised again.
Okay, I tried to do something about that a minute ago, but it didn't work out. Here, I've got Yvonne right here, and then I'll go to Olivia. Yvonne, hi.
Hi, Michael. I was wondering about in the United States, all the federal employees with their devotion that are working now for like 34, 35 days. They've missed paychecks. They're in food lines, working Ubers, and because they're devoted. And their service. I wonder how you thought about that.
Well, for many of those people, there are principles involved. They realize they are necessary to the welfare of the country. So many of them do. There are those who are not calling in sick. And, it's getting to be a dangerous situation in aviation and in other places. So, they have a devotion to the principle of the country. They know in a way that they would get paid even if they called in sick eventually, but they have higher principles. Many of them do. And this is, we could get off onto this thing, but it's a real shameful episode in the history of this country, and it's about as bad as it's ever been. So there's so many people here who really love their country, and they're devoted to the welfare of the country, and not just to the man who is making their loss of financial stability inevitable. They have higher principles, many of them. That's my estimation, and I believe that much will come out of the resolution of this particular problem. And many scales, will fall from the eyes of people who have been blinded about the selfishness of, I'll just say, this administration. Anything else, Yvonne?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's see now. Olivia, I think, okay, 1 second. Hold on. Just trying to get there.
She had raised her hand by mistake.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Now, has everybody spoken who wishes? Frida, do we have Frida here? Here it is, Frida. Yes. Can you comment a bit on? Wow. I'm not sure what that sounds like.
We talked about all of those, and now Ario has his hand raised.
Okay, you did talk. We talked about these things. Did we? I just want to take a quick look. Okay, Glamour of the Path versus Miss. Yes, we did talk about that. Indeed, we did. So, right, Frida, that's my take on it anyway. And coming around to it, and Ario, and there you go. Okay.
Okay, hello.
Hi.
Today is Friday, and this is also the day for the meditation of solar angel. And here in this paper, it is said that the solar angel will one day become the sole luminary in my microcosmic sky.
Sky, the soul luminary.
Yeah. Then can you describe what does it mean? Because I understand this soul means that only, or is it just something?
Yeah, the soul, S-O-L-E. Well, they're playing with words there, okay? But the only luminary, so you see, in other words, people are misled at first in a symbolical way. This is all symbolism in a way. The luminaries become, for them, the mental body, the astral body, none of, even the physical body, those become the guiding star for many people. But that has to all fade down. And in fact, we reach a stage where the presence of the solar angel irradiates the inner consciousness. That's what I would call the microcosmic sky, is the inner consciousness. And we look towards the soul for guidance, and it illuminates our way, and we don't look towards the other lesser luminaries, mind, emotions, and body of the personality. So, one day, the monad will become the greater luminary, but in the stage that we are going through right now, the solar angel, the egoic lotus, the causal body, this is meant to guide us. And the microcosmic sky is our consciousness, and we no longer think about, having a wonderful mind or being so satisfied emotionally or being comfortable physically. Those attractors are gone. And instead, the solar angel is there alone with all of its qualities, attracting us to live the spiritual life. That's how I understand it. The only luminary in our inner consciousness at a certain period. Now, one day that will be transcended, and our triad and our monad and all that kind of thing will become the greater luminaries in our consciousness, but not yet. Let's just get the soul in its proper position, the solar angel. Am I being clear, Ariel?
Yes, thank you. I think
yes.
it was clear.
If it clarified it, that's good. Now, for a lot of us, the soul is not the only luminary in the inner consciousness. We're thinking about this and about that, and we're attracted to what's called the extensions of our personality. And we don't have the point of tension, which is equivalent to the solar angel. We're not there yet, but we're learning how to merge and blend and be infused by the solar angel, and then it will be the principal guiding light in our way of living our life, and of course the spiritual light. So we let go of lesser stars, lesser attractors, and we focus on this great radiant sun we call the solar angel.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
Okay, Ariel. Thank you. Okay, anything else? Anybody? Anything further? Okay, Alex. Okay, Alex. And there you go, Alex.
Hello, hi. I just was going to say a couple of things. It's interesting that as the Piscean age winds down and passes out, that this cultism is so prevalent, and it takes so many forms. And like Olivia mentioned, even in politics, demagogues and certain political leaders, they're like cult leaders. And there are so many, well, the extreme Christian right and any fundamentalist religious organization and countries, and North Korea, for example, is a cult. The whole country is a cult. And the essence of cultism is to separate, is separation, isn't it? And insularity as opposed to universality. And yeah, so I was thinking that, and then I was thinking about tyrants, and so I had a question. I was meditating in Full Moon Lucis Trust headquarters, and over my shoulder were your books on the shelves, and which attracted my attention: Infinitization of the Self and The Tapestry of the Gods. And on the shelf below were two very large volumes by Torquem Sardarian,
yes.
Armenian mystic. Is that right? I've never read him.
Occultist, really.
Occultist.
Yes, really. Yeah, he came to the country, and he was a very bright man, like a triple Scorpio, and very powerful. And he explained a lot of the Bailey work to people who needed his kind of explanations.
Yeah, well, I found reading it that's exactly what is useful for, that the language that he uses. You can use this language, and to explain to people in very simple terms the ageless wisdom. And I was just reading this morning a quote that I'd copied, which was about evil, and he said, "Evil's created by man." Well, it's just the ageless wisdom reworded. Evil's created by man on the path of his evolution. Those who created evil through their separatism became identified with evil and became the source of it in the world. In reality, evil doesn't exist. It's a temporary phenomenon. Evil is its own destroyer. As soon as evil starts to exist, it works for its own destruction because it doesn't receive nourishment and direction from the principle, from the life of the one self. So first I wanted to ask you about him, which you've commented on it, and secondly,
he was a good man, and very Agni Yoga in a certain way, and a lot of first ray, but basically I think some second ray there as the teacher. And his interesting, his daughter carries on his work, Gita Saradarin. She's been a guest at the University of Seven Rays conferences, and we meet her. She's in Arizona just like we are, and we meet her now and then. Of course, without Torquem there, maybe it doesn't have quite the same push. He was quite a powerful figure.
It's a very powerful book,
and he did well with a lot of people. Some people wanted to read the straight stuff, and others felt that they could benefit from his interpretations.
And I just found the language is very usable for passing on principles. And I just wanted to ask you about that comment that evil is its own destroyer. As soon as it starts to exist, it works for its own destruction.
Well, let's just say as soon as it begins to be noticed. The thing about the in my view, the thing about the Black Lodge and the Counterforce is it seeks to work surreptitiously so that it is not recognized for what it is. When it is recognized, the path of its destruction has begun. And one of the things that the Christ does is he may create a kind of scenario where good and evil appear as they are side by side. And then you have to use what's called the sword of discrimination, which he brings. I come to bring not peace, but the sword of discrimination to make your choice. Master Moria talks about this quite a bit too. he says, it's a very sinuous line between good and evil. They use many of the same methods, and you have to be very careful. He says, we could eliminate them, but then we'd eliminate you too. So, I better not laugh. Sorry.
But when demagogues sow discord and and spread evil, they're self-destructing, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Because they will be. Basically, what will happen is they have arranged not only to be severed from the solar angel, but to be severed from their own monad, which will mean that they have to go through a whole solar system once again. They have to start from the very beginning as the monad, as if it had no projections, no progress, nothing like that. Maybe somehow deep inside they realize the error of their ways, but of course they too are saved in the long run. It's all a question of timing. They have willfully, under the first and third ray, made up their minds to preserve their limited power. So DK calls them brothers of unique blindness who have wandered far into the land of distances. And boy, it's they basically have turned their back upon the love aspect, and that's why the first and third ray, as the Nazis were using it, as they received the inverted Shambhala force, was devoid of the second ray of love, and they doomed themselves eventually, and that is the fate of all members of the Black Lodge who do not redeem and who do not repent. So, but however, evil is, look, it's ignorance. In Buddhism, evil is ignorance, and we can't help it. There's going to be planetary evil because of ignorance. But then there is a willful evil, which is different than pure ignorance. The alternative is shown to some people, and they still choose to preserve their powers, limited though they may be.
So Michael, if evil is discord and it's against the principle of life and it's self-destructive, we look at a demagogue and we think, if I did those things, if I said those things, if I ate those things, if I willed those things, I would be, dead. But what supports them? How do they?
The ignorance of the people, because they play to the lower nature of man, who is just subject to planetary evil and to normal evil of ignorance. They play to that, and that energy supports them. And great devas of a negative kind, of an unprincipled material kind, support them. They are prisoners of a great material deva, it is said. And they evolve along a devic line of Mahat. And they take the concrete mind and make it a 13th sphere. And he says it's the greatest tragedy that can befall a human being, to render the concrete mind into one of 8 or one of 13. And all of their evolution is along a certain devic line which forsakes the solar angel and the Syrian method of evolution. But it's free choice, and they just have decided they want to preserve their prerogatives as they understand to be, because they are very powerful. They are initiates of the previous solar system, but they have no faith. They have no faith that things can get any better than what they were for them. That's why DK calls them brothers of unique blindness. Amazing.
Well, thank you for that explanation.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff, but he says we shouldn't speculate about it too much, because it's not only is it fruitless, some word like that, hopeless, fruitless, but it's dangerous, both fruitless and dangerous.
Okay.
Attracting their attention, Okay.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
You bet. Well, there are people these days that are being used, obviously, by these surreptitious forces, these very cunning, hidden forces that manipulate. He says, look, if you give in to your dweller on the first three rays, you will become either the destroyer of souls on the first ray, the deluder of souls on the second ray, or the manipulator of souls on the third ray. He didn't, go further, but you can go further yourself. They want to captivate the volatile essence of a human being and enslave that human being, and they have their methods of doing that. And all of that is into the dark occultism and stuff like that. But we have the opposition, and during the age of Aquarius, many of us will study and apply the white magic of the soul. And many magicians of former days will emerge, and they will have no use for the white magic of the loving soul. They will just be the mental magicians, as DK says, and they will be the opponents of the white magicians. So just get ready for it, It won't be all peaches and cream during the Aquarian age. One will have to battle for the sustainment of principle. Yeah, the fight goes on. Okay. All right. Anybody? And if not, we can actually let's see here. Okay. Got that, Olivia. Got that.
I see no other hands or questions.
Okay, Michael. Thank you. I think, look, since this nascent fascism is sweeping through a number of countries, and since the Nazis are rising again, and these violent rejecting groups that operate on the basis of racism largely and cultural difference are rising again. And since they're filled with quite mindless devotees, or at least conditioned minds which do not see the truth, minds that are filled with illusion, let us in fact meditate on this glamour of devotion and what it's doing in the world today, and try to dispel devotion. It's kind of interesting that if you turn to page 340 in the Rays and Initiations book, you're going to see something interesting. It's how we get rid of glamour at the second initiation. And basically, you'll see something surprising, that while it begins with dedication, that dedication results in glamour and is expiated through the right kind of devotion. See, this is interesting, because the third factor, in this particular case at least, releases us from the glamour. So the right kind of devotion can be very useful, and we have to learn how to discriminate. The solar angel has tremendous devotion as a heart of fiery love to uplift the human race, and the major rays of the Christ were the second and the sixth. He had the sixth ray personality at that time. I don't know what it is now. Maybe it still is. And the second ray soul, and certainly the second ray monad. But the sixth ray was part of it. And interestingly, the United States has the second and sixth ray as the major rays. So this is why I think the fight is so extreme now in that particular country, and why certain agents, ignorant agents, have been chosen to bring in fascism again, and the dominance of the strong over the weak, basically. So, the end of compassion and so forth. because this is a country engineered by the regent, Master R, the regent of the United States, where the Christ is going to have a lot of work to do, and he's going to choose a headquarters. And in my view, it could well be the United Nations, but we're still at least 100 years away from being able to see where and when might be the emerging Christ. We have so much to do about the externalization of the hierarchy just from the disciplic level. And we have one more period of reading and understanding and assimilating and applying the bridging treatises, which will be produced by the Tibetan. Now, it's taken 100 years to get this far with the second group of bridging treatises. First came Blavatsky, and then in 1919 and 1920 became the beginning of the Tibetans' work. With Alice Bailey, it ended in 1949 when she died, but it's continued until now. Reading, assimilating, applying, understanding. And thus it will be, I think, with the third installment. So we have a lot to do before the Christ can reappear. You know how they do it. They don't send in the most powerful first. The return of the Christ will be upon an edifice which has been properly built, and he'll be like the capstone of that. So the aspirants, disciples, initiates, and so forth have really to get to work building the edifice, and the masters next, and then, only then, the Christ. So we have a lot of work to do simply to prepare men's minds and hearts for the reappearance of the Christ. And when we say, I have no other life intention, those are pretty serious words. Okay. So we'll deal this time with the glamour of devotion. And we'll just be, you know, when you do this in your own little groups, and we can follow exactly what's here, 10 minutes of silence and so forth. Right now, we'll just do a little of the silence, but it can be effective. So this silence helps us achieve some kind of growing group unity and the sense of group synthesis. And then, since this is essentially dangerous work, because the major attack will be in the field of the astral body, we'll use the protective formula, tracing this cross in light, both for ourselves and then in a way seeing the cross as representing the entire group. So the eyes will be involved. It's a little different representation of the cross. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. And just somehow realize the lighted, protective nature of this cross for the individual and for the group. Prevents us from being, swept away in these very powerful forces, especially upon the path. Devotion is a big thing on the path. Now we're going to make of 3 lights 1 light. So we focus the light of matter from the personality and the light of mind, reasoning, thinking, the logical light. And we focus these 2 lights together on the plane of mind, that plane of mind that we can control, the highest level of the lower mind. And these 2 lights merge, the vitality of matter and the light of mind as we usually consider mind. But then there's the light of the higher mind, the light of the soul, and we try to visualize that soul light. And we bring it down, from the area of the higher mind into the lower mind and merge the revealing light of the soul with the light of matter and of ordinary mind. So the light of the soul descends and merges with the other 2, and we watch that imaginatively. And 3 lights become 1 light. 3 lights become 1 light. And from that 1 light, our searchlight, our instrument of revelation and of dissipation will be generated. And so as we see the 3 lights merge in 1, every thought is backed by soul light and is vitalized by the vitality of matter. As we see the 3 become 1, we say together, the light is 1, and in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. Oh. then the formula, with the sense that this great searchlight is being extended on behalf of the group onto the astral plane, where we can use it to detect the presence of this glamour of devotion. It's really blind devotion in this case, unthinking devotion, and where we can use the searchlight to dissipate this glamour. So with that in mind, and extending imaginatively this beam from the Ajna center forward, we say, radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning, and the outer world, subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. So our beam is, into the subtle world, the astral world. It's going to help us find this sort of rosy, ecstatic glamour of devotion and help us dissipate that fog, even though it might be a beautiful fog. If it's not truth, it's not beautiful. So we're going to strengthen our beam. We draw down the spiritual will from our soul nature and from beyond, and cast it into the beam, which we strengthen, as we say, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. And our goal to find every fog where devotion is hiding the truth. Sometimes devotion can reveal the truth, like love can reveal truth. So our beam is there, it is strong, it detects, it finds the areas of glamour, and it helps to dissipate them even as the sun dissipates the fog. And when the dissipation has occurred, the sun of true love and true devotion will be shining upon the astral plane to good effect. and not the blindness of fanaticism, blind, misplaced devotion. And so think about the glamour of devotion, how it works, what it has taken away from humanity, how it has interfered with proper growth and entrance into spirituality. Think about blind devotion, unthinking devotion, narrow, fanatical devotion, and what its effects have been. We'll take a few moments. So often this blind devotion prevents us from seeing the truth of things. It works against the spiritual discernment, which is one of the powers of the soul. We cannot see things truly. It's the case with glamour in general, but now we're thinking about looking rapturously upon the object of devotion, whatever it may be or whomever it may be, and not able really to see things as they are. So we have some idea of what has been taken from humanity because of the indulgence in this glamour, fed by the forces of obstruction, the forces of delusion, trying to delude us. And then we use the words of power. With our beam fortified, brilliant, and ready to dissipate the fogs of the glamour of devotion, especially blind, fanatical, unthinking devotion. And we say, the power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of devotion. The power of our united light negates the quality of the glamour of devotion from affecting humanity. the power of our united light destroys the life behind the glamour of devotion. Now we take these words of power into our silent meditation for 5 minutes, and we visualize the light penetrating into the glamour and producing its weakening and its dissipation. So for 5 minutes we do this with intensity of purpose, silence and intensity of purpose. We need the sunshine of loving clarity to shine upon the astral plane. And certain of the planets will help us here as we move towards the second degree. And many of the glamours that quite normally afflict humanity will be lifted, dissipated, as disciples learn how to do this in their own lives. So there's a general clearing of these beautiful fogs of exaggerated value, and we see things more and more as they really are, without the thoughtless exaggeration of blind devotion, which can lead us into so many great errors of thought and feeling and behavior. So we will sound the Om 3 times, affirming that we have done some work on the astral plane. It's clearer now. We imagine it's a little clearer. There are certain winds that blow away the fogs, and certain rays of the sun which dissipate and cause the evaporation of these fogs, and clarity, a little more clarity, reigns as we seek to love and see clearly at the same time. These are the virtues of Venus. Mind, emotions, and body in an improved condition with 3 Oms. So with consistency, we work weekly, and you can also use your beam with reference to the group, of course, but use your beam to help clear whatever ray glamours or astrological glamours, whatever you detect within your own nature. When you're finding a distortion in your own nature, you can work on its dissipation in a manner similar to how we are working here. Tomorrow we have our continuing Ask program. It's in the evening, and it'll maybe, it's about the soul of nations, and let's see if we undertake some emergency work on behalf of Venezuela. Not sure about that just yet, but we will see. And Sunday, the attracting money for hierarchical purposes. And Alex just let us know something here about the breaking news from America. Now here I am in Finland, you know. Donald Trump announces in the Rose Garden he will open the government without funding for the border wall. In a major victory for the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and the Congressional Democrats. Now let's end Brexit. This is an amazing announcement, and we'll ponder. I mean, in this case, principle went up against egotistical whim, and so far, we seem to be finding that principle is winning. So please do join us, and if we do further emergency work or visuals of a meditative kind, we'll be letting you know. The condition, as pointed out by our colleague, Dr. Becerra, it's quite dire. People have been eating everything in sight, and there are no more pets, so the story goes, and people are losing weight at a rapid rate. It's affecting the national health. There's many who are leaving the country, many, and it's just one of those really emergency areas. And our work, of course, is to meditate the thought forms of solution. Okay, so thank you, Alex, for that note, and we'll be seeing you all, or some of you anyway, as many of you as may be possible anyway. Tomorrow we'll be working with the soul of nations, and I think Tuija and I will discuss it, but I think we'll be focusing at least some on the Venezuelan catastrophe. So love and many blessings from all of us, Olivia, Tuija, and myself, and we'll be seeing you. Okay, bye-bye.